let's take a look at this, this handout, U.S. steel tariff. Probably we don't have time to read through it, but please read this. It's quite interesting. They analyze this U.S. steel tariff was a big issue in 2000, 2001, 2002. So, like George Bush in his presidential campaign, he promised that he's going to impose some tariff on the imported steel. And if we read this article, then we can understand why he promised that kind of things. Because steel is the major industry in certain states. For example, Pennsylvania, if you look at the second part, these political factors come into play in Mr. Bush's decision. Most certainly, like political support from key states such as Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, all of which produce steel in advance of last year's midterm election. So those states. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. We have two handouts, two kinds of handouts. Please. So we say like swing states. So that states are like we can see that names in like this Obama-Romney's election. There are certain states that are like close to each other. Like 50% supports this candidate, 50% supports like this candidate. So in those swing states, like Pennsylvania, West Virginia, look, Bush wanted to win more votes. So he kind of, decided to impose a tariff to get some vote from these steel producers. That actually worked. So he won all these votes in those states, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, all things. And that's probably how he could won the Al Gore in 2002 election. And likewise, in previous presidential election, Barack Obama announced a tariff on tires. So every election they have, they always promise something based on these political things, not really economical things. And so if we more about this tariff, like in 2002 US tariff, in the US there's a ITC, there's a US agency, International Trade Commission. They recommended that maybe if you really want to impose tariff, then that's going to be optimal tariff. If you impose more than that, then it's a little bit dangerous. Dangerous means it's going to be like some other countries will file a suit, will complain that to WTO. Then it's going to be more complicated. But the government, Bush, does not listen to that recommendation. So what U.S. government did is actually imposing a lot more tariff than this recommended tariff. So that created a really formal complaint from EU. So what is the reaction? The EU immediately filed a lawsuit. Not only EU, but many countries say that this is illegal things. So they kind of asked WTO to correct this problem. And WTO decided that this is really bad things. So WTO asked them to remove this tariff. But that's legally binding. WTO is much stronger than other UN things. UN agency, their decision is just a recommendation. Government does not need to follow the recommendation, but this WTO's decision is legally binding. They have to follow it. Otherwise, if US does not follow the WTO decision, then those countries who file the suits can impose some retaliatory tariffs. So more tariff than these things. So what they did is actually they imposed a tariff toward imports from the US. For example, EU, if you look at the second page of this, are there what did WTO decide? Then WTO yesterday said that several tariffs imposed by President Bush in March last year were illegal. That's what they decide. And the next thing, where do we go from here? The EU has threatened to impose sanctions of some billions of dollars on US imports such as citrus, oranges, or textile or something, holidays and more, something like this. So, this is what they typically do. If there's too much tariff, then other countries will impose more tariff, and more tariff, that results in a trade war or something like this. Anyway, after 2 years, U.S. Finally decided to remove all this tariff. There are many reasons. Steel industry, steel producer will be happy about this tariff, but like a citrus or orange producers will be unhappy about this retaliatory tariff from the EU. Some people say that orange or citrus is produced in Florida, where the president's brother is a governor or something like this. So they kind of make fun of this kind of things. But anyway, so this is like a real issue. And WTO is kind of somewhere in the middle. That's why we have to always consider these WTO things. And yeah, that's a response from the European countries. So WTO has a formal dispute settlement. That's the most important part of WTO. Before WTO in GATT, we didn't have any dispute settlement. So when countries have some complaints, there's no way to solve this problem. But that is so WTO said this is bad. Please change it. So finally, there's changing it. I think the U.S. People already knew that, expected this kind of thing. If they impose that much tariff, then EU or other countries will complain about that. But still, they impose that. Temporarily they can win the election. They can win the votes. And maybe it took 2 years until this WTO made a final decision. It takes quite a long time. So for those 2 years, they could protect those industry. So 2 years is kind of long enough to be protected. So, something like that. And yeah, so the brain of WTO is GATT, so General Agreement of Tariff and Trade. So let's reduce tariff and promote more trade. That is kind of the most important thing of the GATT. Why? Because before the Second World War, there are too much tariff. If you still remember, like a Smooth and Hawley Act, after Great Depression, each country become more and more protected, and that could be one reason for even war. And before the World War II ended, people from many countries met in Bretton Woods. They made this kind of thing. Let's make some organizations that handle this kind of reducing tariff and promote trade. So IMF and World Bank was created, but this trade organization was not created. Only brain was there. But 1995, finally WTO was finally established. So WTO is the same as a GATT. That means they want to reduce the tariff and promote more and more trade. Yeah. So I was going to discuss this, but probably we need a game theory to discuss this kind of a trade war, or sometimes a quota or subsidies. So we're going to do that next class. So that means we are not going to have a quiz next time. So after I go through these things, then I'm going to have a quiz, this and this. But I didn't finish this. Please don't leave now. Anyway, so that's for and look at these handouts. That same handout in the back side. You can see this WTO. So this is a table of contents of GATT, Article 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, until 2023. So we discussed this in the first class, and that's actually posted on the cyber campus of the first week. What is the first Article 1? What is the Article 1? What? Yeah, most favored nations. That means, differently. There should be no most favored nations. All the nations should be treated equally. Right? So something like this. And Article 11, XI, is about quota, general elimination of quantitative restrictions. So we should not have a quota here. And tariff is also like that. If you look at Article 6, V1, VI, anti-dumping and countervailing duties. What is dumping? Dumping is dumping. So when you export some goods in too low price, that's dumping. That distorts that country's industry structure. So if some countries export the good in a too low price, then that importing country, that the suffering country, can can impose this kind of retaliatory tariff, so-called anti-dumping duties tariff, right? So something like, so it is a guarantee. It is like a protected for these suffering countries. Like countervailing duties are for export subsidies. If South Korea provide too much subsidy to automobile firms, to Hyundai, so like that company grew rapidly, but there's unfair game to other countries who didn't receive subsidies. Then those countries who didn't receive subsidy can impose some duties, countervailing duties, for the goods that received the subsidies. So subsidy itself is not really accepted. Like if you look at 16 XVI, then subsidy is not really accepted. And if you look at XIX, which is, what is the 19, right? So Article XIX, emergency action on imports of particular duties. So there's an emergency action. So if my country receives too much import from some country, then that's also bad for my domestic industry. Then we can declare that this is too much, so I want to impose some emergency tariff. That's called a safeguard. And that should be done some emergency and temporary, but how to interpret this emergent, I mean, that's kind of a different issues. So if you look at this table of contents, that is all about how to reduce this tariff and how to promote and more free trade. So like that, articles. Oh, one more thing. If you look at article, oh, there's no XXIV. Maybe I forgot to. Oh, maybe it was in the next page. I forgot to print out. In article like 24, which is XXIV, that's about this. Sometimes they have a room to agree to have free trade areas. But if you think about these free trade areas, there's a direct violation of this MFN. What is FTA? What is the free trade area? Korea-US FTA or some FTAs. There's a bilateral trade agreements. If we have export and import from different countries, between two countries, there are no tariffs. Yeah? But that applies only for those two countries. But what is MFN? If I have a zero tariff from the automobile from the US, then there's a special treatment for that country only. Based on this MFN, if I want to have a zero tariff for automobile from the US, then I should have a zero tariff from the EU or like from Japan, from all other countries. Everything should be treated equally. So this kind of a bilateral trade agreement is a direct violation of this, the most important article, which is MFN. But there are many debates. So WTO does not really support this free trade area, but they support more on this multilateral area. But it's a controversial things. And so they say it's three remedies: anti-dumping, countervailing duty, and safeguards. Those duties or tariff that can be imposed when a country do something bad, then my country can protect my country by imposing this kind of retaliatory tariffs. So this is this comes after some countries do something bad. If some countries are doing some unfair dumping, then my country can impose anti-dumping tariff. If that country is providing some unfair subsidy, then my country can provide some countervailing duties. This is okay, yeah? But this is not okay, but those things are okay. If some countries too much import surge, then I can provide a safeguard. But this is for unfair. But this is not for unfair, even though it can be imported for fair. But if there's too much import, then we can just declare the safeguard. And this anti-dumping So anti-dumping or countervailing duties for tariff, and this for either tariff or quota, mostly tariff. And that the country who want to impose this anti-dumping or CVD or SG have to prove that because of this dumping and subsidy, whatever things, my country has a material or serious injuries. They have to prove that. How to prove it is not really easy, and this is a technical term that is used by WTO. There should be some causal relationship. There should be some cause for my country's injury. That should be proven. Yeah? And something like this. So the process is that like each country, like if I think that my country has a serious injury, then my country's government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, whatever ministry, they make a committee, domestic committee, to prove that my countries indeed have some injury. So they can report these things to exporting country. So look at that. Because of your dumping or subsidy, my country has some injury. So please remove that things. And mostly exporting country does not listen to that kind of recommendation. Then that thing goes to WTO, and WTO, it takes like they have a panel, some experts, like some group of panels, and they make a final decision. Maybe it takes maybe 1 year, more than 1 year. And then if WTO make a final decision, then all the countries should follow that things. And let's do only safeguard and do the rest of them next time. Safeguard is the temporary import restriction through tariff or quota for import surge. So if you look at, again, table Article 19, that it is written that there's emergency action on imports of particular products, right? There's a safeguard. And extraordinary remote emergency situation. Infrequently, yeah. If exporters are developing countries and safeguards sometimes are exempted, like a 3% rule, that means if the US imported like some textile from a developing country, but that total amount of imports that US imported was less than 3% of its entire products. Like if US imported like some textile, some cloth from that country, but that country's like a portion is 2% of its entire country's textile, then it's negligible. They don't need to like do that. And if it's more than that, then it's gonna be like a big portion, because it can be major things. And there's a different. Yeah, that's different from anti-dumping and countervailing duty, which is for unfair practices, but this safeguard can be both fair and unfair. It doesn't matter. So they just want to restrict. They want to protect their domestic industry. That's why it's not punishment. So it's something like please don't export anymore. So I want to do some like a limit on your import. So they have to pay for their actions. So if they like have some safeguards, then they have to like reduce tariff for some other things, for other goods. So it's kind of negotiating with that countries, because it's not for like unfair things. If this is based on unfair practices, they don't need to negotiate. But it's based on, I mean, it doesn't really matter. If it's based on fair practice, but they have to negotiate these things. And it has to be taken on MFN basis. Like it cannot be on one specific countries, but has to be on all these countries at once. And if you have this one, WTO documents, I don't have much time, but that's one actual example. That's the Committee on Safeguards made these documents, and that's about Japan. Like there's a shiitake, they pronounce shiitake. Shiitake is a kind of mushroom. There's a very famous, in my area of Japan when I was living there, it's kind of long, and we say like a tempura, right? Like fried. The fried tempura shiitake is very delicious things. And anyway, like there was Japan Agriculture, we say JA, Japan Agricultural Association is very strong union. And they thought that there are too much imports of this mushroom from foreign countries. So that has some damage to Japanese farmers who produce these mushrooms. So they asked the government to file this one. So government kind of investigated. So this is a report from Japanese government. And indeed, a date of initiation is December 2002. And I mean, you can just read this. They just simply say this is actually made before they complained to the WTO. So before WTO, they just made this report. Yeah? It just kind of reported that indeed there are some problems of this import. And if you go to the second page and time in the 6th, there's a time limit for submission of evidence. The time limit for submitting the evidence is a March something. Time limit for viewing something like this. There's some deadlines and made by some Japanese government people. If you go to WTO, then you can see a lot of documents like this.